All right, George, you were going to tee us up on the decision concerning one Daryl Jackson. It's not good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, his waiver didn't go through like we were talking about before the show. It's really unfortunate. The kid decided he wanted to transfer, come up to get closer to his home in Tallahassee, applies for a hardship waiver, ends up settling on Florida State, and, well a month after he puts his name in and decides he's going to transfer, the NCAA has a meeting. I believe they had a representative from I believe all the conferences, at least one person from each conference there, and they decided to tighten these rules and completely change the hardship waiver for second-time transfers. And he just got it back. I believe they got it back either late Friday or first thing Monday morning, but they finally shared it with the media Monday morning that he did not get it, unfortunately.
George, quick question. I mean, obviously, he had 3 sacks last year for Miami, started in 11 games for the Canes last year. I guess my question would be, did they interview, because obviously he did the one-time waiver from Maryland to Miami. Did they interview Miami at all? And I guess, I mean, I'm not trying to start speculation here, but did Miami at all maybe interfere in this decision by the NCAA?
Yeah, that's a real good question. When all this was going down, there was a lot of questions around that, and I had heard that Miami was going to make this difficult for everybody at one point in time, but it seemed like they had just decided, okay, they're going to let it go through, and they were fine with it. So, he didn't get it. So it makes you wonder. There was speculation about things posted on social media, possibly some whistleblowers sending stuff into the NCAA, whether it was a Miami coach or somebody down there, I have no idea. So I won't, implicate them on that. But yeah, that's about all I have on that.
I mean, we
Chris,
used
do you
to
have any other
implicate
information for us on this Daryl Jackson situation?
Yeah, there was a lot of rumors stirring around if Miami, may have took too long on some paperwork, things to that nature. And while there's on the media side, no proof of that, I do know that Miami signed off on fully accepting that he was going to transfer to Florida State, and that they were fully understanding that it was also within the conference, but they would hold nothing against the young man if he got to play in the 2023 season. Now, that's what the final paperwork may say, but I don't know that it didn't take them an extensive amount of time when it wasn't supposed to, because that was the rumors, the amount of time that it took. But I personally think that because Daryl Jackson's not the only one that had applied for this hardship waiver, not across the ACC, not across the country. There was another gentleman, wide receiver at North Carolina, that did the same thing. He transferred for a very similar situation, and he was also denied. The number that I've heard is 17 different ones were denied a waiver, a hardship waiver this season. And if you want, what I believe happened is Daryl Jackson and also the gentleman that transferred to North Carolina both transferred before they tightened these rules, before it became more of an issue. But they applied the new rules to both of them, and including the rest of them. And what I personally think happened, and I think when they reappeal it, it will be a due diligence appeal on they didn't go case by case. They just told everyone the same exact thing. They let one rule apply to everyone. And in doing so, that's where Florida State and North Carolina and a couple others could either come at this together and appeal together to the NCAA and state that they don't feel that there was due diligence done. But I don't know if NC and all of them are going to do that, seeing how they're kind of mad at us for wanting to leave the conference. But regardless if they want to go together with us or not, we can still use that term of you basically didn't do this case by case. You just told everyone the same thing based off of your new rules.
Dan Wilcox, just keep sticking it to us.
Chris, quick question. If Darrell, let's say he does get the approval, let's say he goes through this and he is able to somehow play this season, what would Florida State be getting out of him?
Well, if you look at his stats going back to when he was at Miami, he only had 3 sacks to my knowledge in the entire season. But let's be honest. When they played against Florida State, they had a lot of their players out of position, so to speak. I mean, he was covering either Benson or Toafili on a wheel route, and this man has no business trying to cover a running back anywhere, no matter what. So I think a lot of his stat missings that he had at Miami is a lot based off of what they were asking him to do at Miami. What he was getting put in position-wise wasn't working out. But everything that we've seen out of him in spring, everything that we've seen out of him in the fall camp so far, because Monday was the first day that he wasn't able to fully go because they did not approve the waiver. So he was getting to practice as if he was going to play this season. I mean, I don't want to say that he's anyone in particular, but we'll just say if he was to be in and Fabo wasn't in, we don't fall off at all. He was very disruptive on the line. Really like his second move. He's obviously one of the strongest players on the entire team. We liked the way that I think he's by 0.3 of a second coming off of the snap quicker than he was when he first got to Florida State. Now that's a little bit, in depth of statistics of how fast someone's coming off of a snap, but he has improved in every measure being at Florida State. Not only, I think the most important part of this is him being closer to his mom, because I know while he was at Miami, that was lingering in his mind because he brought it up multiple times in the media when they would talk to him about, how he felt about this game. And he said, look, to be honest with you, I'm only worried about calling and checking on my mom. That's where my mind is. So I think with him being here at Florida State, closer to his mom, he could just key focus on football. He could be that student athlete. So I think we would have seen, or we will see, a completely focused and hungry defensive tackle.
It only makes sense that you can be more at ease mentally and emotionally if you can leave your loved one, be in person with them, go to practice, go to class, do the things you need to do, and then return to them rather than having to make phone calls. And my goodness, am I reading this right? So there was a day and age in which just about every student athlete had to sit out a year that was not a grad transfer in the transfer process. And then it seemed like the NCAA got lenient to the point that if you basically proved that you were shot a dirty look in the locker room, that you could get a waiver and get transferred. And to your point, Chris, they've now tightened up. But here we have a young man, a student athlete, who has an ailing mom and would like to be close to her, and we're going to deny this transfer. I'm at a loss.
Yeah, and even in his words, when he spoke to Florida State media about the situation, he said that the worst part of this was that his mom is upset, stating that this is her fault, and he had to, explain to her why it was not her fault. That everyone fully anticipated that he was going to get the waiver based off of, the hardship that they were going through. Not only the coaches at Florida State, but the way that Darrell made it sound, and also the coaches at Florida State, that the NCAA kind of gave them the impression that because of the reason he was transferring, he would more than likely get the waiver approved. So they all had good feelings going into the situation, and then all of a sudden it all crashes down to a no.
Chris, quick question for you before we move on this subject. Do you think it, and I'm just throwing this as an option here, the NCAA may hide behind. Do you think it had anything to do with the fact that Florida State would have been his third team in 3 years? Do you think that had anything to do with it? Because obviously, I think we all are in agreement. I think Mark is 100% right. Your mother's sick, whatnot. You want to be closer, and he should have been approved. But with that being said, do you think that may have played a role that they're saying, okay, you're jumping from Maryland to Miami to Florida State, 3 schools in 3 years?
I mean, I would say that you definitely have to put that into consideration, whether you're on the NCAA side of it or if you're on the personal side or even the collegiate side of it as far as Florida State goes. I think that's why you put your fillers out as far as asking the NCAA, asking others that have been through the process, also looking at the percentages of approval for others that have been in similar situations. Because just the year before that, there was a gentleman that transferred to USC to play. He was also he was a defensive back and his name's slipping my mind, but he transferred to USC. It was the third school in 3 years, and he was approved within, I think, 3 weeks of arriving on campus. Now, his hardship was to just be closer to home. There wasn't an ill family member. He wasn't ill. There wasn't like this, dire reason that he needed to be in California. It was just that he was homesick and he wanted to be closer to home. So, but the rules when he did this last season were extremely flexible. Like everyone wasn't throwing a fit about it. And then, you got to base this off of a lot of the colleges were complaining about how lenient these rules were on these guys being able to transfer. So, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, about it with the NCAA. I mean, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. So, I mean, that's why I think you have to go at it case by case. And I'm not so sure that the NCAA did so because of how many denials they put out. And so far, I haven't heard nor found an approval. And there's many different situations of why these gentlemen transferred. So that's my only issue is that it doesn't seem they went case by case. They just put them all in a hat and said everybody's same rules. No, that's just how it feels.
And hey, I get it. 3 years, 3 different schools, but that's kind of the only reason he needed the waiver in the first place. Like, if he wasn't in that situation, he would have never needed the waiver. If he stays another year or two, he's going to be a graduate transfer. So that's, they just like Chris said, they didn't do case by case, and it's kind of like they were trying to make a point. We're not going to take everybody anymore, but their application was already in, and instead of doing due diligence on it, they just cut them all off.
And I guess it came out today that Senator Marco Rubio was sending a letter to the NCAA trying to get them to convince them to take a separate look. I may not agree with you, Marco Rubio, on your politics, but please do what you can on this one.